I'm Lee Wilcox. For several years, my father, Charles Merritt, and I also had a dray business. A dray is, usually, a sideless cart used to carry heavy loads short distances in a single day. Often you are picking up goods from one place, say at the train stop, and transporting it to its destination, or sometimes another dray or railroad. The weight hauled and distance you make in a day depends on the quality of your horse. Later, we added petroleum delivery to the business.
2 years before Clara and Lee Wilcox marry, in 1914, Archduke Ferdinand of Sarajevo is assassinated by a Serbian, and World War I is triggered. A variety of secret agreements between countries to help defend each other becomes a house of cards. Within 2 weeks, Germany, Russia, France, England, and Belgium are at war. In 1917, in March, the Russian Tsar Nicholas II abdicates. In April, the United States declares war on Kaiser Wilhelm II's Germany. In November, the Bolsheviks overthrow the Russian government.
In December of 1916, I married Charles Lee Wilcox in a white satin wedding dress with white fur trimming. We were married quietly at the M.E. Parsonage in Rawlins at 3 p.m. on Sunday. We left Saratoga on Saturday, but arrived in Walcott too late that evening to get a train, and were delayed until Sunday, returning to Saratoga on Christmas Day. My sister had a Christmas and wedding dinner waiting for us. The wedding announcement in the Saratoga Sun says of my husband Lee that he finished his education in Lincoln, Nebraska. He is known as one of the best workers in the county among the younger class of men and is a hustler, steady, reliable, and trustworthy. Lee is working with his father, Charles Merritt, in the dray and oil business. Lee and I live out on Cow Creek. Our firstborn son died shortly after birth. My husband is, for a little time, local agent for the Saratoga and Encampment Railway. I never met Lee's grandfather, Hiram Wilcox, but Lee's grandmother, Eveline, is in Saratoga, as well as his father's brothers, their wives, and families. The Wilcoxes and near relatives are quite a presence in Saratoga.
My husband Hiram passed over to the great beyond in January 1893, his last days being spent at the home of our son Charles. For a long time he had been entirely helpless. Due to the progression of his rheumatism, his hands and his lower limbs were drawn out of shape, and he had wasted away to a skeleton. He was conscious up until a few moments before his death. We buried him in Cadwell Cemetery. My daughter Emma, Miss Ivy, nursed him the last 2 weeks of his life. That was 25 years ago. I've seen the 1800s become the 1900s. I've helped Saratoga turn from a frontier town into a respectable community. I have been a Christian since a young woman, and my faith sustains me. Now it's 1918, and I am setting my house in order that I may be ready.
Lee Wilcox again. I was drafted and went to basic training November 8th in 1917. I did my basic training at America Lake, Washington, and then was stationed there until the end of the war a year later. I was assigned to do clerical work.
I went to American Lake by train in December of 1917. Lee had a few days of leave after basic training. I stopped in Utah and visited my sister, Mrs. S. F. Carnes, who had moved to Utah from Saratoga. I returned to Saratoga after this visit. In July 1918, Lee had another leave and came to Saratoga. Many other Saratoga men served in the war as well. Generally, single and widowed women entered the workforce, many leaving jobs as domestic servants and learning new skills. Married women took full responsibility for the house, raising the children, and running the family businesses. We also worked through our affiliations with Eastern Star, the Rebeccas, and others to provide everything from food to wrapped bandages for the war effort.
On July 4th, 1918, I left Saratoga with my brother Rusty, Gene Walk, and a couple of other men to find a place to enlist. We managed to do that, and we served for 4 months. Then the war was over, and we came home. Rusty has a poem called "The Spell of the West" that gets it about right. What is it about this western country that so grips the soul of man and binds him to its bosom like the grasp of a mighty hand, that we curse the winds in winter and the long months of cold and snow, or the heat and dust of summer? Why we stay, we do not know. Maybe it's the great call of adventure that's found in the western sphere, or just clean, free livin' that somehow we hold so dear. Is it the free-hearted people the West is noted for, or the pure air and sunshine? But still, there's something more. It's because we love the country. In our hearts we thank thy Maker, because we're living close to nature, work of the great Creator.
World War I employs extensive trench warfare and was the first war to use tanks, chemical warfare, particularly mustard gas, and airplane bombing. U.S. President Woodrow Wilson issues his 14 points to peace in 1918. World War I will last until June 1919 and end with the Treaty of Versailles.
In January of 1918, I was installed as Grand Noble of the Odd Fellows Saratoga Lodge. I had previously been Grand Noble of the Grand Encampment Odd Fellows. When I moved to Saratoga, I changed my membership. As it said in the Saratoga Sun article, a fine time was had by all. The same month, my mother, Eveline Wilcox, died. My mother ran the journey of her life in 86 years and 3 months. It is a path marked with deeds of kindness and cheer. Flowers, not thorns, sunshine, not shadow, did she scatter everywhere. Truth was the inspiration of her life, and by kindness she exemplified its great worth. She rejoiced in our successes and grieved in our misfortunes. Her services were at the Presbyterian Church at 4 o'clock, June 25th, 1918. She's buried on the family ranch. When Mother died, our family had been in the Saratoga Valley for 25 years.
Lee Wilcox. After World War I became a postmaster in Saratoga, Wyoming. My second son, Keith Merritt Wilcox, was born May 31st, 1922, in a log cabin in our homestead just south of Saratoga. Our first son died very shortly after birth.
Our homestead was located on the hill south of town. Part of the land was later donated to the town for the water tower, and a small portion is in the clearance area for the runway at the current airport.
3 years later, I fell ill and suffered for many months. Clara and I were married almost 10 years when in March 1925, I went for an appendicitis operation to Longmont, Colorado. I didn't go alone. My father, Charles Merritt, our son, Keith Merritt, and Clara came with me.
The operation was supposedly successful, and Keith and I returned to Saratoga. But unexpectedly, Lee died on March 16. Family legend says sponges left in the body was the cause of death, but we have no facts to prove or disprove the story. A special second train was run from Encampment to Saratoga to bring Oddfellows members and friends from that community to attend the funeral service. He was one whose influence among men was always for the good, and who, by precept and example, worked always for good citizenship. I was appointed to Lee's post office job. I was used to working outside the home, and having the postmistress job was a godsend to a young widow with a small son.